Today we're going to be walking through a tutorial on how to build entities or objects in Blockbench. This is unscripted and we do things a little different around here. We have more of a Bob Ross mentality. So mistakes are welcome and we build them into the project. If you have any other questions, please hit us up in the comments or send us a message or check out our website, outlandishlycrafted.com. Here we go. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So we've got all of our stuff set up now. We're going to save everything and we're going to move over to Illustrator. There's two ways to do texturing. I do it differently than most people. Most people would right there create a texture atlas, which is just a PNG file with each of the blocks having its own space on that PNG file, which we call an atlas. An atlas just means it has location. You can take locations or coordinates in the file, and that signifies the face of that block, and you just assign those coordinates to that block. So I do it differently. I don't like doing it that way. It's very difficult for my brain to process it, and I have found that many people, this is a breakpoint. So they'll spend the next few hours, they get done with this, and they'll spend the next few hours failing at texturing and getting the real effect that they want, and they'll really struggle from there. And so this is a different approach. You don't have to use Illustrator. You could use Paint or GIMP or Paint 3D or anything that you want. It's just a box that we're gonna copy the textures that we want into, and we're gonna organize them in such a way that works for us. And you kind of learn this just through experience and trial and error, but we're going to organize the textures to where the joint areas mean something. So, you know, when we're doing a chair, we might want to have the cushion of the chair go up against wood so that those can overlap each other. And then that will help give that an effect that those connect and that there's a gap there and that those are joined like they would be. And so it's kind of just a different way. When you do it the other way, what happens is every entity is perfectly isolated to itself, and there's no ability to mix the textures to create the kind of real world structures that we have. And so this is a method to mitigate that. What I'm doing right now is I'm looking through all of my textures, and sorry, this process is takes a while. So this is another hour-long process. Feel free to fast forward this or skip ahead. What I'm doing is I'm looking through them on a different screen because they're copyrighted textures. So I don't want to just show all of them. I'm only going to show the ones we're using. So I'm looking through them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag them over into this document. We've already named our document and we've set it to 1024 by 768 at both resolutions. You could do it at 64 by 64. You could do it whatever you want, but we're doing high def, so that's a 1K texture. So we're working in Illustrator. The content that we're working with is either JPEGs or PNG files. They're all high quality, high def, and we have the legal licenses to everything. We paid for these assets. It's very critical that you're doing anything, that you don't just take stuff off Google. The things on the internet are copyrighted by someone. Someone owns them. And so if you're going to build something that you're going to sell or you're going to give away to someone else, you're going to put out and you're going to let friends have, or you're going to put out there, it's very important that you use legal assets. And even if it says royalty free, that does not mean it is a free asset. Royalty just means that you don't have to pay somebody every usage. It does not mean that the first usage is free. It just means that you don't have to continue to pay those people. So a majority of the content you find on Glyph or different websites is typically not legal use for commercial, which this is commercial use. And so you cannot use 99.9% of the content you find on the internet is not acceptable to make mods and this stuff with. You either need to make it yourself, or you need to pay a website or asset company for licensing rights to that content. And then you need to make sure that that licensing right includes stuff like YouTube, streaming, production, product creation, marketing, online production, video production. All of those things are in the licensing terms, and you need to make sure that those are approved. Most of the other thing, that 1% of the stuff you can use, is almost always required a link back, or requires you to say whose asset that is you're using. And if you're going to do something with 1,000 assets or 10 assets or 100 assets, it's almost impossible for you to give credit to everybody properly and honestly and morally. And so it's really important that the sourcing of your assets, your music, your sound effects, your texture files are really important, is all done properly. If you wanted to create a product, say you wanted to sew a shirt, or make a shirt, or make something, you can't just go down to the store and buy a pattern. The pattern that you buy at Walmart is not licensed for resale. So you can't just go buy fabric and make a product and sell it. That's illegal. You'd have to have a reseller license for that pattern, because the pattern's licensed by someone. It's someone's art. And so in that same way, you need to be aware of all of those things when you're dealing with creating items. Now, if you're just going to create it for you in your world, and you're not giving it to anybody, and you're not sharing with friends, and you're not broadcasting it on YouTube, and it's just you, then you can get away with using most of the stuff for personal use without any problem. But as soon as you broadcast it on YouTube, as soon as you use it with friends, as soon as you show people or you give it to anybody, you violated the law, and that's a $250,000 copyright violation, maximum penalty for each violation. Each file, each sound effect, each texture. And so those are things that you need to be aware of, because if you're making stuff for work or business or to sell to someone, or you're doing it as a hobby on the side and you're making money off of it, that's commercial use, that's a business. And if you're making models and you are doing it for someone else and you take compensation, and they then go put it in something to put it on the marketplace and then get sued for a lot of money, they're going to come back and they're going to sue you. And they're going to go after you because you're the one that created and said that that was unique art that you owned and then sold it to them. So I see that a lot, that people are not using legal assets to make content. Now, if you're creating something with Blockbench and you're painting it in Blockbench, then you painted it, it's your stuff, and it's your copyright, as long as you didn't start with someone else's entity. If you start with the Minecraft entity, then you're using the Minecraft copyrighted entity and you're modifying it from there, and that's part of their canon. Now, Minecraft has some rules and protections and some of that stuff in there for that, but some of the other platforms don't these days. So you have to be careful when you're creating stuff for different platforms. It's not always yours just because you created it in their game or their environment. So right here you can see some JPEGs. I can tell that they're JPEGs because they've got the white box around them, so they're not transparent. PNGs would be transparent if transparent was on. We should talk about PNGs since we're making entities. It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but you need to use a PNG 24-bit with transparency on. 24-bit is how many colors are in the spectrum of the file's compression. The other alternative to that is PNG 8, or sometimes -8, and that is 8-bit, which is 256 color, and that is a much more compressed file. However, that, I believe, does not work for entities. It's my understanding it needs to be a 24, and I haven't tested this. Somebody in a video said it, and so it's just one of those things that I have been following the rule, but it does cause the file sizes to be a lot larger. When I go back through and do optimization of my content, I'll probably test that, and then I'll do some more compression on my PNG files to try to get those sizes down, and it'll help the load speeds of the files. It is something that you want to be aware of. The bigger the files, the slower the load speed, the more bandwidth required. And if you're on mobile, you're eating up the bandwidth of those people on mobile. So you got to be careful about some of those file sizes. If you can use the same texture in multiple places, then that's always helpful. So if you were going to make 5 boats and all of a sudden, and you decided that you could make all 5 boats with one texture atlas file, that's way better than having 5 different texture atlas files where they're almost all the same except you're changing the flag or something. If you could work out a way where you could change that differently or set it up differently, design it differently to where you could share that one file for 5 entities, you would save a good amount of space and bandwidth there. So you can see I'm jumping through textures that I like, I'm adding them in, and all I'm doing right now is just throwing them in. And then every once in a while I go back to my model and I'm just trying to think through, okay, well I've got wood legs, I've got, do I want to do metal legs? Do I want to do some type of material? What kind of things do I want to do? So you have to think through, well, what is there? What do I want to do? I was looking for some metals. I really was struggling with metals. I need to look up some more metal assets. So I kind of went back and forth. It's also hard. I'm on a 2K screen, so it's really hard to look at the thumbnails. Excuse me as I yawn in your ear, but it's really hard to look at the thumbnails and get an idea of what the image is sometimes, and so you have to open it up and kind of look through them. Yeah, I like this one. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys be. You could, if you have questions about this process, you can always ask them in the comments or at the website, or on our Discord channel, or on the Blockbench Discord channel. But a lot of this is really just organize the images onto the page, get them to where you want them to be. It's a lot of trial and error of just learning how it works. One of the nice things you could do though is you can have this file open and load it into Blockbench at the same time. So you can apply the texture to the chair, and then you can come back into Illustrator, edit the texture live, add something to it, take something away, and then save the file, and it will update that into Blockbench right away without having to close and open and redo all of that, so that you can really work live on what you're doing. And you'll see I'm going to do some different things I've learned here in techniques, and there's different reasons for these. One of the reasons why you want to have different orientations of your blocks is because some blocks will have different orientations. So you're going to run into times where you rotated a block and it's going to be north and south instead of east and west, and you're going to have a texture oriented that way. I haven't figured out how to fix that other than reorienting the block and rebuilding the block, which I don't want to do when I'm in the middle of texturing. By the time I get to texturing, I don't want to go back and change block design unless I really have to, or I have to tweak. It's okay to tweak it and optimize, but I don't want to rotate and be messing with stuff. So what I do is I have my long main stuff, like the frames and all that stuff. I'll have a left and right and an up and down, or a north and south and an east and west for those main ones. Okay, I'm gonna drop out for a minute, let you guys continue watching. So in here I'm going to add in some transparent text. I like doing this. I really like doing this when I'm going to do a glow. And so we're going to do this different ways to do it, but we're going to make text. I'm going to do one letter at a time. We're going to line it up, and then we're going to use a mask to knock out that letter in the material or the texture here. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow it to be transparent in the game if we use the right material. So what I do is I build it how I want it. I create the mask. I select the text and then I copy it. Paste it into, and this takes a little trial and error. So after you do the mask, you make the letters on top now that are outside the mask transparent, and I just have a overlay. I'm sorry, not an overlay, outline. So the line texture, the line's probably like 3 or something, so it's a few pixels big. And I learned to do that because I want to highlight the lettering with glowing. I messed up, you can see in one of these where I didn't get it inside the outline properly. So you gotta go back and do it again. I always struggle with this. It's an easy process, but the interface is an aggravation because how when I click the buttons on the right, it takes me out of the mask, and then I am working like I'm in the mask, and make sure you're inside the mask, and then when you're done, you always got to make sure you click out of it, which I just did there. So now you can see through, and I'm going to save. It's a good idea to save. I'm going to change the version, and I'm going to save it into the right place. I hate how the new interfaces on Windows 10 keeps changing the search and the interface, and it does this stupid pop down and all this crap. It drives me nuts. So here's where I couldn't decide on what I was going to name it, but I ended up deciding for just Throne A, but that's going to be, in essence, CyberAxe's Throne. So we need to save the main file, which is the AI file. That's your editable file. And then we need to export a PNG file that's transparent. So if it's PNG 8, it would say that PNG 8 instead of PNG on the right. So I exported it at 1x, which is 1024 by 7 or 1024 by 1024. Do some more just fine tuning. There's a few things I missed on that corner. Same thing, stop it. And because these are so big files, the save takes forever. So I have to redo the naming and that crap again because it didn't finish the first full save. When you get up to higher end textures, save times can take minutes. When I'm doing full animations and really high end stuff and the like 20 megapixel up to 100 megapixel, those end up taking 10 to 30 minutes to save.